Good Yom Tov, my friends. I am Rabbi Yitzchok Tiechtel with Chabad of Nashville, wishing you and your families a sweet new year. And may you be sealed in the book of life for a Shana Tova. Please give me the opportunity today, in honor of Yom Kippur, to share with you words of inspiration with a message that hopefully hits home to you personally. Over Yom Kippur, we recite many prayers, and there's a lovely short prayer recited 10 times on Yom Kippur. And it reads like this. I will translate from Hebrew into English. And so, God, our Father in heaven, grant honor to your people, glory to those who are in awe with you, good hope to those who seek you, confident speech to those who yearn for you, joy to your land, and gladness to your city. What is the meaning of these words where we ask God to give confident speech to those who yearn for you? Friends, hatred is sweeping social media. The anti-Semitism that has reared its ugly head in the United States, Europe, and all parts of the world during the past year is so painful, even if not shocking. Obviously, there were the horrific murders at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Chabad of Poway, Jews gunned down in Jersey City, and a Jew axed to death in Muncie, all in the last few years. And then there are the numerous stories that don't even make the headlines about Jews that may have stabbed or been literally stabbed and beaten in Boston, in Manhattan, in Brooklyn, Los Angeles, and numerous European cities, just to name a few incidences over the last year and two. Recently, Israel went to war to stop 5,000 rockets aimed at its residents. And a tsunami of anti-Semitism swept the planet. What would you do, I asked some critics, had your family been attacked with rockets intended to create a bloodbath? Would you just let your kids die? Instead of blaming the perpetrators for sending the rockets, from amongst civilian population, Israel is blamed as the aggressors. It is literally like blaming Great Britain and the United States for the devastation of Berlin in 1945 and to say Hitler wasn't guilty, God forbid. To say Churchill was a killer. How shameful and how pathetic that would be. I was proud of the late renowned actress and comedian Joan Rivers, who got it right. She says, "They're criticizing us," she told a reporter after the 2014 Gaza war. "We are the only sane nation in that part of the world. Let me tell you," she says, "if New Jersey were firing rockets into New York, we would be hit back hard. And if we heard they were digging tunnels from New Jersey to New York, we would wipe them out." I now refer to her, jokingly, as Rebbitzin Rivers. And then there were the other stories of the vandalizing synagogues and vicious anti-Semitic slogans heard at many demonstrations and on university campuses across the country. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, they were all filled this past summer with repulsive Jewish hatred. And even Ben & Jerry's had to inform the civilized world in July that they will not sell its ice cream in the land where Jews have lived for 4,000 years. So now, we know why we pray so hard for this, where we say, God, give confident speech to those who yearn for you. Because at times like this, we need confidence, we need inspiration, and we need direction. For no self-shame should befall upon us. Because one of the greatest tragedies is when we internalize anti-Semitism and we begin loathing ourselves and blaming ourselves. And when we become psychologically uncomfortable and ashamed with our identity. There's an old joke about an army captain trying to determine the religion of his men in his platoon for the dog tags. So he calls each one's name and each one steps up and answers affirmatively. He says, Jones, guy steps up, says Catholic. O'Connell, Protestant. He calls out Smith, the guy steps up, Unitarian. And then a guy by the name Davidson is called. He says, Davidson? The private gets up and says, he stammers, sir, you see, my family wasn't really religious. We did some of our traditions, but mostly he didn't even finish his sentence, and the captain interrupts and says, Jewish. First of all, it doesn't really work that way. They say a Jew is having a hard time making a living, so he got himself a job at a church. After a couple of weeks, the priest meets with him and tells him how satisfied he is with his performance. Just, I ask you 3 favors, the priest says to the Jew. He says, when you come out of the bathroom, don't wash your hands without water, because that's the holy water. Secondly, please stop hanging your coat on the cross. And thirdly, her name is Mother Teresa, not Mother Shapiro. Friends, it's also so unhealthy for us and our children and the world when we put ourselves down. It is emotionally crippling for us to be ambivalent about our being, our core, our history, our DNA. They tell a story about Mitch Julius, a Jewish American billionaire who runs one of the most successful hedge funds in America called Canyon Capital Advisors. He's the guy who sold his Beverly Hills mansion for some $50 million. He always wore a kippah. Now, it's very rare to see among top hedge fund managers in America someone to wear a kippah. Julius became an observant Jew after the Canyon Value Realization Fund, which now has a revenue of about $24 billion. And it had its first negative year in 1998. If you remember, then the markets shook up, and the whole world shook, and everything fell apart. And he knew he had to do something beyond his hedge fund to ground him. He wasn't very observant, but he said Torah is the answer. Connect. A friend of mine asked him why he always felt the need to wear a kippah on his head, while sometimes it would attract comments. People would think, why are you doing that? And Mitch responded, I once met the legendary Jewish Hollywood star Kirk Douglas, who died last year, by the way, in February 2020. He was 103 years old. He was a man who had an extraordinary career that spanned 87 films, 73 big screen features, and 14 of them are on television. And Kirk once shared his personal story. And he said as follows, and this inspired this Jewish hedge fund manager to always wear his kippah. And Kirk said as follows, I once was offered to serve as an actor in a film that was filled with anti-Semitic undertones. And my role was supposed to be the Jew hater. And I wondered, Kirk says, how in the world would they offer me such a role? And don't think I'll be offended? He said, and then it hit him. They simply didn't know he was a Jew. So they had the audacity to offer him such a role in the film. And Kirk says, I felt so ashamed. People could think that I joined the legions of people who hate Jews and are fine with the gas chambers. And from that day on, there wasn't a single person who met Kirk Douglas who didn't know he was Jewish. And this guy concluded, when I heard that story from Kirk Douglas, I said to myself, I will never remove my kippah again, for I want everyone to know that I am Jewish. And if every Jewish person of influence would declare openly his or her Jewish identity, people would be far more ashamed to express hatred, to express bigotry, and would even be educated as to what a Jew really stands for and how a Jew lives. Friends, that is why we pray 10 times on Yom Kippur the following words. Please, God, give confident speech to those who yearn for you. We need to be confident Jews, proud Jews, and this is the time to express your Jewishness more, not less. Of course, you shouldn't put your life in danger, but as a community, as a people, we need to rise to the occasion and become proud Jews and utilize our influence to inspire others. When Kirk Douglas told them that he was Jewish and he loved it, you know what happened to that film? The film was canceled. Friends, we must also never make anti-Semitism our identity. For the most important reason and purpose of our existence. Because if our only motivation to stay Jewish is to show the finger to Hitler and to Stalin, how inspired will I and my children be about it? I don't want my kids to come and think that the meaning of being Jewish is that we are people who are hated, and we are people who are always struggling to survive. We are the people who are called on to fight in every generation to stand up to our enemies. We are history eternal victims. Friends, we don't want our kids to look at it that way. Jewish continuity today is in danger. And it's your kids, it's the next generation that needs to save it. And this message on its own could be very uninspiring and unmotivating if that's it we tell our kids. That there's anti-Semitism and you need to save the next generation. Because who wants to be part of an endangered species? And if all our kids know about being Jewish is that the world is against us, where does it leave them? They think that there's something wrong with us. I want my kids to celebrate their identity and not to be anxious about it. Not just to survive, but to live it. I want to teach my child, my students, my community, the beauty, the depth, the relevance, the warmth, and the life-changing wisdom of Judaism. How incredibly rich and inspiring it is. I want them all to know that the main reason for our existence is because of the infinite richness and light that Jewish people and Judaism have brought and continue to bring to this world. Friends, they say the story about the Israeli Minister of Education and Culture in the 1950s when Israel became a modern state. His name was Zalman Aran. He was a secular non-believer, maybe even an atheist. He is the one who established a Jewish knowledge course nationwide in every Israeli school. You would ask, why would an atheist establish a Jewish knowledge course that every Jewish kid in Israel has to study? And he said, it happened during the 1956 Olympics. There was a soccer matchup between Israel and Russia. It was only 3 years after Stalin's death. Many Jews, this took place in Russia, many Jews gathered legally to watch. Israeli athletes with Israel's menorah on their chest, can you imagine, in Russia? The Russian band playing the Israeli anthem and the Russian anthem. For Jews stuck in the hell of communism, it was messianic times. The pride these Jews felt, and Israel winning such a game. Wow, such pride. That Shabbat, the central synagogue in Moscow was packed. Out the door to the street, full of people. The Israeli team was there, sitting prominently up in front of the entire congregation and community. And they call up one of the boys, one of the top players, to come up to the Torah and make a blessing. He steps up to the bima, to the Torah, and the entire synagogue was watching. What a dramatic moment of Jewish pride, Jewish victory. And you know, this Israeli player couldn't make the blessing. He didn't know the blessing of the Torah, one of the most basic fundamental facts, things a Jewish kid knows. He was an athlete, but he never learned in Israel how to make a blessing on the Torah. It's a blessing that Jews have been making for over 2,500 years. And at that moment, this secular man, who was an atheist, Zalman Aran, Minister of Education, said, this can't be. This picture is off. We built a state. We have amazing Jewish athletes, but they don't know who they are, what their history is, what Judaism is all about. They know the dangers of being Jewish, but they don't know about the depth and excitement of being Jewish. He went home to Israel, and he established an across-the-board course in every school, a Jewish knowledge course. And until today, it's part of the Israeli curriculum, whether you keep it or not. But kids know where they come from and where they're going. Here's a little thought to appreciate the depth and meaning of Jewish identity and our unique story. You know the line they say, tell me who your enemy is, and I will tell you who you are? You want to know who the Jewish people are? You want to understand what Judaism is all about? Just look at who, throughout history, to this very day, today, 2001, despised us and craved our destruction. I'm going to give you now just a partial list. Pharaoh, Nebuchadnezzar, Haman, Vespasian, Stalin, Hitler, Himmler, Eichmann, Bin Laden, Ahmadinejad, Nasrallah, Rouhani. These are people who dedicated their lives to murder and maim as many Jews as they can. And when I see who hates the Jews, Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Taliban and groups who are more than happy to behead their enemies, throw women off rooftops, and fly planes into buildings, I know there's something very good, special, and holy about our people. You see, friends, anti-Semitism is the inability of the world to make peace with a living, moral, kind God, to make peace with goodness, with holiness, with morality, universal and eternal peace on our planet. Anti-Semitism is the global war of evil against good. And I want my child to know how good and holy he or she is, how special his or her mission as a Jew is. The mission to be an ambassador of love, an ambassador of light, of hope, of kindness, healing, an ambassador of truth and redemption. And when we see anti-Semitism around us, this only means that our role and mission in history is so much more needed, that we need to continue to fill the world with light, that we need to be more Jewish, friends. When we are more Jewish, the world becomes a healthier place, and the non-Jewish world becomes elevated, inspired, enhanced. Recently, on Monday, June 28th, 2021, the Israeli president, or the then Israeli president, Reuven Rivlin, and his chief of staff, Mrs. Rivka Ravitz, they came to the White House and they met with President Joe Biden in the Oval Office. Mrs. Rivka Ravitz is an observant woman, a mother of 12 children. She's 45. She immigrated from the United States to Israel at a young age, and for the last 20 years, she has been the chief of staff of Israel's last president. So during the meeting with President Biden, the Israeli president, Reuven Rivlin, told President Biden that Mrs. Ravitz, my chief of staff, is a mother of 12 children. As the President of the United States of America heard this, he didn't say a word. He just kneeled on his legs and he bowed down to this Jewish mother of 12. Mrs. Ravitz was in shock. The leader of the free world bowing down to her, a religious Jerusalem woman, in the White House. The American president was kneeling before, as we say, a Yiddish mama, a Jewish mom. And she reflected afterward, he didn't bow down because I was the head of the president's, of Israel's chief of staff. And he doesn't know that I will soon be finishing my doctorate. He wanted to express appreciation for the values of family, of home, of motherhood, and sacrifice for the sake of the next generation. He actually kneeled for me, for my grandmother, and all the mothers wherever they may be. Friends, the world respects Jews who respect Judaism. I want to share with you a story of a friend right here in our Nashville Chabad community. A friend of mine told me that she was due to speak at a prestigious medical conference this past two weekends ago at the Four Seasons Hotel in Las Vegas in front of 1,000 physicians on the subject of clinical nutrition and lifestyle management. 3 days prior to the event, she had a COVID exposure, and the decision was made not to get on a plane to go from Nashville to Las Vegas, just in case she turned up positive at some point. The organizers of the event told her it wouldn't be an issue because she can Zoom her presentation live, and she was going to speak 2 weeks ago, 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. Yet she realized in Las Vegas, 4:30 is not a problem. It's Friday afternoon, it's not Shabbat yet. But Nashville, we're on Central Time, and it would have been close to Shabbat. She would have had a conflict because Shabbat was going to come in at 6:44, and it was only going to give her 15 minutes or so for what should have been an hour-long presentation. So here she was given a clear choice between observing the Shabbat or delivering her presentation in front of 1,000 doctors. But she couldn't do both. So she asked if they can schedule her a bit earlier in the day, and the answer was no, due to the other speakers and materials already having been printed with the schedule of events for that day. Now, this was the first time in this woman's secular life that she had to make such a decision. Am I speaking for the doctors and transgressing Shabbat? Or am I going to keep the holy day of Shabbos as a proud Jew? And she told the organizers that her husband and herself were observant, and therefore they had to turn off their technology due to the Shabbat. She said, is there any wiggle room in the timing of Shabbat? They asked her. Maybe you can move Shabbat an hour later? And I was pretty sure the answer is no. And with great respect, they accepted her answer and her position, and they wished her Shabbat Shalom. Not an easy decision to make, but friends, the world respects Jews who respect themselves. I read a fascinating story recently about Rabbi Marvin Heyer, who serves today as the director of the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles. And for many years, he served as a rabbi in Vancouver. And he was once invited to a very special dinner with Queen Elizabeth II of England and her husband, Prince Philip, who just died in April 2021 at the age of 99. And Rabbi Heyer informed the organizers that although he was flattered by the invitation, he would be unable to eat at the event because he has a special status of keeping kosher dietary needs. And the palace assured him that he's going to have his own set of dishes, Rabbi. You're not going to have to worry. Your own dishes, your own cutlery, and you're going to be served specially ordered kosher food. Okay. The rabbi accepted the offer. He sat down. Yet after the first course, all the guests were asked by the queen, by Her Majesty, to move to another table. So like this, all the guests will acquaint themselves with one another. Nice idea, but not for the rabbi. Because what's he going to do now about his kosher food and his utensils? They only set it up on one table. And if he went to a new table, the new dishes and cutlery at the other table wouldn't be kosher, which means he would be the only one not eating. On the other hand, to stay in his seat, that would be defying the queen's request. What do you do? So the rabbi decided he would take his kosher dishes to the new table with him. So as the musical chairs experience began, people are moving around the room, and this rabbi moved around with his cutlery and his dishes. And now most of the Gentiles didn't really pay much attention, but there was one Jew who took note. He was a distinguished federal judge in Canada, and he felt very ashamed. He looked at the rabbi in disdain. He said, how could it be that the rabbi would act in such a distasteful manner? Like a beggar searching for food? When the royal family had gone to such great lengths to accommodate him? Rabbi Heyer explained to this federal judge that was so embarrassed, said the British Empire is 550 years old. The laws of kosher are 3,333 years old. Should he really cast away kosher because it might be improper in the eyes of the Buckingham Palace? Is Moses inferior to the royal English family? The Jewish judge was quiet. He was embarrassed. And so Rabbi Heyer brought his plate to the new table. And then again, after the next course, as the guests moved again, the queen asked everyone to move to the next table. The rabbi picked up his plate once again and carried it to the new location. And as he was walking with his plate and his cutlery, Prince Philip walked by, and he noticed that the rabbi was standing with his cutlery and the plate in his hands. Rabbi, the prince said, you don't trust that we have dishes for you on the new table? Why are you carrying your dishes? So, Rabbi Heyer presented to Philip a lesson from Jewish law and Jewish chemistry, and he says, Your Honor, the flavor of food gets absorbed into utensils. So if a plate was used to eat shrimp, I can't use that plate unless the flavor is extracted through boiling hot water. And he gave him a lesson in Jewish law. So therefore, I need to transfer my plate from table to table. Prince Philip found it so intriguing that he called over his wife, the queen, to get this lesson from the rabbi. Now the queen and the prince engaged the rabbi in a relatively lengthy discussion about the laws of keeping kosher and all it entails. As the entire crowd just stood around and was wondering, wow, the queen and the rabbi seem like old pals from school. Shortly thereafter, seeing how well received the rabbi was by Her Majesty, the Jewish federal judge decided that he too would capitalize on his Jewishness. So, what does he do? He approached Prince Philip and the Queen, and he introduced himself as another Jewish judge here from Canada. The prince looked at him and asked him one piercing question. If you are a Jew, why are you not holding your dishes? Friends, the world respects Jews who respect Judaism. One final story. A few months ago, we lost the former chief rabbi of Great Britain, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who died at the age of 72. May his soul rest in peace. Rabbi Sachs was a philosopher, a moral leader, the author of 25 books with 16 honorary degrees. And he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth and was also made a member of the House of Lords. And Rabbi Sachs once shared this experience. When you receive a knighthood and you're honored by the Queen, you must kneel before the Queen. Yet, Jews don't kneel to a human monarch, only to God. So while all the other knighted ones kneeled, the palace provided for me this little thing which you hold on to, this little rail, so you can incline yourself a little without actually kneeling. Rabbi Sachs says, when I did that, the Queen turned to Philip and said, "Why is this night different from all other nights?" Yes, this night is different than all other nights. And this is a source of pride, not shame. Because it is our uniqueness that ignites the world with more love, more truth, and more peace. And today is a unique moment in history, and we must not forfeit it. In a society that's yearning for hope, for moral direction, for clarity of purpose, and for meaning in life, and an awareness of God, for healthy marriages, a blueprint for educating children, and a way of dealing with all types of moral, psychological, and emotional struggles on so on and so many levels. It is our great calling today to inspire ourselves and the world with our divine blueprint called the Torah, which has kept us here for millennia through thick and thin. God, I ask you today, give confident speech to those who yearn for you. Shana Tova.